Now that thumbnail was not clickbait. If you're a pilot, you know this is something you don't ever want to hear on the radio.
Number 1 Mike Bravo, low R2 alert, check altitude immediately showing you 1,200, climb and maintain 1,600.
And in this case, it was about me.
Number 1 Mike Bravo, check your altitude immediately, clear, climb and maintain 1,600, I'm showing you at 800.
Howdy folks, Mark Serbu, gun designer, gun nut, mechanical engineer, and private pilot.
Traffic 5-1 Mike Bravo, you are now indicating 700 feet. You're 8 miles northwest of Walford Airport, climb and maintain 1,600.
I am especially glad to be here with you today because I almost wasn't. Yeah, wouldn't that be great if I could get a headline like that? Beloved gun designer. Anyway, yeah, it doesn't take much to go from just being a regular old everyday person to being a tragedy and a headline. This was something that was pretty scary. I mean, in retrospect, at the time, I wasn't that worried about it. I was just flying along, talking to approach, and getting vectored around for what they call the RNAV 17. Sorry for my regular viewers here. I'm going to use some pilot jargon, and obviously you don't have to watch it. I'd appreciate it if you pass it on to your friends who are pilots or pilots who know pilots, whatever. I want to get this out there as much as possible because some things happen here that, you know, if people realize what I've realized now, we might save some lives, and that's pretty cool. So I'm getting vectored around for the approach to Low Country Regional, KRBW, and the controller's asking me what it's like, you know, how does it look, can I see, and of course I was completely in the clouds, and I let him know I was at 3,000 feet, and he just cleared me down to 1,600 feet, and I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. And at that point, I must have made an error. You know, I'd love to say it was the autopilot that went crazy, but you know, it's one of those things, you practice this stuff all the time. When you're an instrument-rated pilot, you have to keep current. So I've practiced this dozens upon dozens of times, and I've never had this issue happen before. And I guess I must have just, I don't know, I've got to go back and play with my autopilot and even see how I got in that mode, because the autopilot was still flying the plane straight and level, but in a dive. So somehow when I was going from, and, you know, and I wasn't on GPS steering, I was just on, you know, heading mode. So I'm just twisting the knob here, going to whatever heading he's assigning me. And when I went down to that 1,600, or you know, I thought I was going down to the 1,600 foot assigned altitude, something screwed up, and I'm just in a dive. Didn't even realize it. I broke out of the bottom of the clouds, and I looked over, and I'm like, oh, hey, great, I can see the ground. And I'm thinking, man, that ground's pretty close. And then when I looked forward again, my GPS is blaring on the screen, terrain alert, terrain alert. And unfortunately, you know, my plane's 20 years old. It doesn't have all the greatest stuff yet. I'm in the process of upgrading my panel. But it's flashing at me that you know, terrain. I'm like, wait a minute, terrain alert. And then I look at my altimeter, and I'm at 700 feet and diving. And as I find out later, looking at ADS-B here, I'm diving at 1,200 feet per minute. So anyway, luckily I noticed it, and I wasn't even like super scared or anything at the time. I just, you know, firewalled the throttle. But you can see by the ADS-B data here that I wasn't crazily yanking back. I just went from a 1,200 foot per minute descent to just a kind of leisurely 600 foot per minute climb, which, you know, looking at the terrain around there, South Carolina, low country, and in that particular spot, it was just trees and some neighborhoods nearby, so nothing sticking up really tall, fortunately. Okay, actually, it wasn't even as bad as I thought. I figured out a way to take the ADS-B data and stick it in a Google Earth. I know those airplane accident guys do this stuff all the time, and figured it out a long time ago, but yeah, it's new to me. Anyway, as you can see here, it has the whole flight path, the whole way, fantastic, altitude and course, everything, really cool. And at my lowest point here, or just beyond it where I would have crashed, it's just fields and stuff, unless we're just seeing this wrong. But yeah, it looks like, you know, I get down pretty low before I actually hit anything. So that's really damn lucky. But, you know, that could have easily, you know, if I'd just been distracted for a little while, I don't know, 10, 15 seconds seems like a long time. And it probably is, but man, that could have gone wrong so many ways. And that controller was definitely worried there for a minute. You could hear in his voice.
1 Mike Bravo, check your altitude immediately, clear, climb and maintain 1,600, I'm showing you at 800.
And I'll tell you, I did not hear those radio calls. Like the 2 or 3 that I've played here, I didn't hear him. In fact, when I called him, as soon as I started gaining altitude, I didn't get any response. It's because I was so low. You know, radio is line of sight, and I was low enough that he couldn't hear me, I couldn't hear him. So those scary radio calls, which would have jarred me into action, never heard him. So it's a really important thing to have some kind of audio alert, because seeing that alert on the GPS was great, but it was several seconds after I'd already figured out there was a problem. But and that's one danger of the way I'm flying these approaches, and I bet a lot of you guys do too in the general aviation world. Having the autopilot fly the approach is, to me, much more reasonable than hand flying it. It does a much better job than I could ever do. But it's one of those things where it's like Ronald Reagan said, trust but verify. If you don't do that, you can get in real trouble. I hand off the duties of keeping my wings level and keeping my altitude, keeping my course, hand it off to the autopilot. Why not? But you really need to verify it, because if you screw up, there's an odd chance it messes up, but I doubt it. Computer, electronics, pretty damn stable in the airplane. Garmin, But I should have trusted but verified with setting that altitude, and I don't know yet, but I will be playing with that autopilot unit to figure out what the heck I did. I watched the Blanco Lirio channel, I watched the Probable Cause with Dan Greider, and I watched the airplane accident channels not to be morbid, but to learn, to understand what accidents are being made out there, and try not to make them myself. I hope most GA pilots are doing that, because it's tough being a pilot. You think, oh, I'm this badass, and I'm you're all full of yourself and big ego, but god dang, you don't want to die because of all that. And that's the thing. It's like you're at odds with the things that they try to teach us. You don't want to have that macho attitude, but it's the macho attitude that got you into flying in the first place. So you've got to have the I can do it all, I can do anything attitude, but at the same time you got to have room in your mind for I could screw up and I'm definitely fallible. So watch the accident channels, learn from my mistakes, and don't die.
Don't die?
There's a plane right now. That poor controller, man, that guy, I should send him a case of beer or something. You could hear in his voice, he, that's a radio call you don't ever want to hear. And I've been flying for almost 17 years, and I've listened to the radio many hours, 860 at this point, and I've never heard that kind of call before, where he's repeatedly called a tail number and said, you're at 1,200 feet or 800 feet. You're at, and he must have been nervous. But when we talked to him, or when you hear his voice, when I talked to him a couple minutes later, he's like, oh yeah, we're trying to get a hold of you. But who knows? Maybe he crapped himself. But yeah, that's got to be tough to hear that. So I'd love to hear from some air traffic controllers out there, and from some fellow pilots. What have you heard out there on the radio that scared the crap out of you? And again, I didn't hear these calls. That's something. You get low enough down where you don't even hear radio calls. It'd been nice to have heard them. But anyway, well, look, thanks for watching. I appreciate you as always. This isn't my normal content for my main channel, for my airplane channel, of course. This is exactly well, hopefully not I almost died kind of content, but this is airplane appropriate, obviously. Anyway, thanks again. I will catch you next time.